Texas coaches, Coach Brackle here from First Down Playbook. After 25 years as a Texas high school football coach, I understand the time, energy, and commitment it takes to compete at your level. First Down Playbook was created by coaches for coaches to help you vertically line your total program. 1 week free team membership for all Texas high school and college coaches. Let First Down Playbook help give you that winning edge.
Want to get right into it, Mallory?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Starting off with the big dogs, the college football playoff. Number 5 Texas hosting at number 12 Clemson at DKR Stadium in Austin, Texas at 3 p.m. Central Time. You can watch it on TNT. Texas, 10.5-point favorites. The over-unders, 54.5.
I don't know how I feel about a TNT college football game, by the way.
It is a little bit weird.
Do
we get Charles Barkley and Kenny the Jet previewing it?
I mean, look, they do the bracket reveal show, and they don't know much about college basketball, so like they might as well do this too.
I'd listen to Charles Barkley talk about anything, honestly.
Kenny, I don't think Quinn Ewers has the clutch gene. Anyway, no, but in all seriousness, right? I think you and Craven talked about the college football draw when it happened and the results of the SEC and the ACC championship game. I don't know. Me and you may disagree. I think me and Powers disagreed in the office a little bit. I think Texas got the good draw, especially after losing the SEC championship game. I think this Clemson team, although I would think that this is a good matchup for Texas, I do think this may be the best offense they've seen this year.
The Clemson offense?
Yes, the Clemson offense.
Well, it's a rematch of Cade Klubnik and Quinn Ewers in that.
And Michael Taft.
And Michael Taft in there,
yeah.
the one-handed interception he had.
Westlake.
From, I believe, the COVID state championship that happened in mid-January.
I was looking back on that.
January.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. I was looking back on that roster, and I was telling Mallory, that game was loaded. Michael Taft, Jaden Greathouse was also playing for Westlake.
Greathouse, yeah.
I believe R.J. Maryland and Brady Boyd were on that South Lake Carroll team.
Yeah, they both were.
I think a lot of people looked at that state championship game and said, we're going to see these guys one day in the college football playoff, but it's been a far bumpier path to that point than we originally thought of. So very interested to see that. The one thing I'll say about the draw, and I was listening to Ross Dellinger at Yahoo talk about this, if one of the criterion that the College Football Playoff Committee uses is head-to-head matchups, why is Clemson ranked behind SMU? It would have given us an intrastate matchup of Texas and SMU if SMU was the 12th seed and Clemson was the 11th seed. It was right there.
Yeah, that would have been a real... I mean, I know, Craven, we can bring you in. I know that's what you were clamoring for, and we were really, really close to that. And I think, one, it's obviously, I think they're looking at record, right? Obviously, they're looking at SMU only losing one game. But yes, or 2 games rather. But yes, it would have been a really cool thing. And I think it was as easy as, well, they won the head-to-head matchup, so you flipped them, you know?
I think the thing we learned the most on Sunday was they will not punish teams for conference championship losses.
Sure.
And the reason is money. They need these conference championship weekends to remain in existence because they need as much money as they can. As revenue sharing comes, they're not looking to find less ways to make money. And if SMU gets dropped out of the playoff or Texas and Penn State get dropped out of a first-round home game, then you look around and you talk about worst-case scenario, kind of like Lashley was talking about leading into that game of, if we all just got COVID and couldn't play the game, we're in.
Right.
We're probably hosting a game. And so you could tell the committee didn't want to punish that, but it was weird seeing Clemson one spot below SMU.
Hey, can y'all still hear me right now? Because I can barely hear Craven, and I don't know if the committee just cut my mic. Can you still hear me right now?
We can still hear you.
Okay, cool.
So, but on the matchup itself, right, I think that we can take a little bit from the SMU game, obviously the second half in particular, where SMU, kind of the end of the first half, really, it was a bad start for SMU, let's put it that way. I think there's a little bit of SMU got a little too conservative at some times, especially as SMU was making their run. I think they got a little too conservative with the play calling. I think they stopped. Again, they were trying to maybe, drain the clock a little bit, so they were trying to, be a little bit more conservative with their run, what they did call in the passing game. But I think there is something to take away from SMU kind of being unstoppable in that second half, right? Literally, it came down to, Clemson getting a great kickoff return and then one pass all of a sudden, and then their kicker hits a crazy clutch field goal. So I do think this Clemson defense in particular, this pass rush, is very, very gettable for Texas. Now in the run game, that's a different story. I think they did very good against the run for SMU. But when it was obvious passing situations for SMU, they were able to exploit that pretty effectively.
Yeah, this is not the dominant Clemson teams of yesteryear, but I don't like Dabo Swinney as an underdog, and I also don't think that Texas's offense is good enough to cover a 10.5 point spread. So this is a gettable game for Clemson to get Texas right here.
I mean, I think if 2024 has taught us anything, it's that these are all gettable games. I mean, Alabama went and lost to Oklahoma. That's why they're not in this deal. So I don't think there's any huge matchup or huge discrepancies here. Clemson does have talent. I just don't think they have an elite unit like Texas does. Like Texas's defense is going to be the best unit on this football field. Clemson scores points, but they're not an offense that's going to scare Texas too much. Wesco's really good out wide, but Texas's DBs are great. I don't see the Tigers running the ball very well. So it's going to be up again to Cade Klubnik to maybe make some plays with his legs or get off script and go do some stuff. For me, this game comes down to the Texas offense and if it can put a team away. I feel confident that the Texas defense is going to keep them in this game, keep this thing low scoring. If Quinn Ewers can get a run game, get some balance, and then go make some plays, Texas is a 10 or more point better team than this Clemson team is.
Yeah, I was going to mention, a lot of people criticized Quinn Ewers in the SEC title game. And again, there have been moments this season where it's been valid criticism. They could not run the ball against Georgia.
Nope.
I think he did miss some throws, but also he had some drops in that game as well. I think that game, Texas is in that game because Quinn Ewers was the only offense that they had, right? I'm not saying he played perfectly. Again, he missed some throws as well, but I think one of those picks, again, I think he maybe threw it outside. He probably should have threw it outside, but I think Matthew Golden was a little bit weak in the pass attempt there. And I know that Isaiah Bond just let that ball hit him, and it was an interception.
Yeah, when I say Texas's offense isn't good enough to cover the 10.5 point spread, I'm not saying Quinn Ewers isn't good enough.
Right. But
as a whole.
But what I am saying, and what to your point, is we know that Quinn Ewers has some mistakes in him, right? We know that Again, I don't know if Clemson's defensive line, pass rush in particular, is good enough to make him worry in the pocket against how Texas' offensive line has looked this season. So maybe that doesn't become a factor where it's a little bit hobbled, a little bit hobbled Quinn Ewers. I don't think that will come into play as much as like the A&M game in particular. But this game, you mentioned it, I do think that Texas' offense, let me put it this way. I think Texas' offense matching up against Clemson is good enough. But to your point, we've seen Texas play down to teams, right? And give them those opportunities, whether it's been Quinn Ewers throwing picks or the pass rush or the pass protection not being quite as good, the run game being inconsistent, right? There's been these little things. I'm thinking the Arkansas game, I'm thinking the Vanderbilt game, where it's like
you can rattle off like 5 games.
Yeah,
at this
exactly.
point.
And like, is that just the Texas offense? And that might just be it at this point because we're in the playoff already. Carter,
I think that is the Texas offense. I think we know what this Texas football team is, and that's an elite defensive unit that's going to have to overcome some inconsistencies on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
I like to, at these games, look at the implications for the head coaches with what a win means, what a loss means. I think for the loss, what it means for Dabo Swinney and Clemson is like your power is fading.
Sure.
You're not using the transfer portal
enough. It also
enough.
depends on how much of a loss.
How much of a loss, too. Yeah, but like Clemson kind of fell ass backward into the college football playoff. Yeah. For Steve Sarkisian, I think a loss in one of the first 2 games, either Clemson or Arizona State, is he next in line on the can't win the big one club?
I would say that it does start. I wouldn't say can't, but I would say there starts to become a discussion of when he goes against somebody his own level. Right, like because there's the Kirby Smart thing right now, where it's like, does Kirby Smart just have his number? Right. Last year was like Kalen DeBoer. Okay, could he just not out scheme Kalen DeBoer when he gets to and so I don't think it's like he can't win the big one, but I do think there becomes a discussion of when he gets to somebody of his caliber of play caller or schemer, is he not able to best them? Now, obviously, he has the Saban thing in his pocket where it's like, we beat Saban, and that's fair, but I do think there starts to become a little bit, particularly when they're a favorite, against Clemson. Yeah. If they're a favorite against Arizona State, I think this draw doesn't help that perception. So I do think it comes back up. I don't think it's a major thing, but the draw doesn't help that potential perception.
Craven, I want to hear your thoughts on it too, because it might be too premature, but right now I think if there's a can't win the big one club, like Steve Sarkisian's kind of loitering outside and James Franklin's the bouncer, like, hey, are you in here? Or like,
this is my apartment.
Yeah, you're my apartment. Like what's going on here, Craven?
I don't see him in the Ryan Day, James Franklin deal. He's been able to beat his rivals. He goes on the road and beat Michigan. He goes and beats Alabama on the road. He wins a Big 12 championship. I think if Texas loses this game, especially in a way that it seems likely that they would, in which the defense plays well and just like the Georgia game, right, where the offense just can't do enough to go win this game, it becomes an indictment on Quinn Ewers and if he was holding the offense back.
I could definitely see that.
I agree with that too. You convinced me.
Yeah. Alrighty. Let's move on to the next playoff game. The one that I would say is probably the tastier of the two.
Speaking of James Franklin.
Yeah, speaking of James Franklin, Mallory.
SMU taking on Penn State Saturday, December 21st in Happy Valley. You can watch it at 11 a.m. Central Time on TNT. Penn State, 8.5-point favorites. The over-under is 52.5. And Craven, I'll let you go first on this one because I heard that you are going to be at that game.
I will be at that game. Going to be cool to knock off that stadium.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm jealous. That's a cool stadium.
SMU have you been there?
No, I have not. I've just seen it many times on TV. Get my team crushed there.
I like the idea of your picture on the screen right now, Craven, in Happy Valley.
Yeah.
Your stoic, stern-faced picture.
Just Photoshop that with the whiteout behind it.
It's your profile picture.
I just call it a valley.
Yeah.
I think SMU in that ACC championship game had the pressure of the world on top of their shoulders, and they played like it in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. They had to fumble. You saw some mistakes and flags. Clemson started 4 of their first 5 drives in SMU territory. It just, from the press box, I remember thinking, we may have just found where the game is too big for the Mustangs. Mm-hmm. And then they come back, they tie the football game, they lose by a field goal, but they're still in the playoff. I say that to say, what the advantage SMU has in this game is there is nothing to lose if you're a pony. Mm-hmm. All of the pressure is on James Franklin and this Penn State football team. The college football playoff was expanded for Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't win at home against little old SMU that used to be a G5 program and hasn't been good in 40-plus years, blah, 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 it's all coming down on top of his head. So I think if you're SMU, you get to go into hostile territory, biggest game in 40-plus years, lay it all on the line, have the whole chip on your shoulder, everybody doubts this type thing, and all the pressure's on the other side, and that could be to your advantage.
I agree with that, Craven, but I do think SMU is kind of playing for ACC respect as well, and you saw that when Clemson is cheering for the Ponies in the college football playoff, even though they're suing their way out of the ACC. They were in the summer, so it's kind of funny how the tables turned there. Of course, that's an administrative thing, not the players and coaches. But what we talked about in the Sunday recap, Craven, of the conference championship games have to matter because you have to follow the money, and they're about to share revenue, and they need the money from the conference championship games. If SMU gets dog walked against Penn State, there's going to be a large contingent of SEC people, Nick Saban, Paul Feinbaum show of saying Alabama should have been in that game because they would have given a better matchup. And I don't know if the committee remembers that in years coming where it's like a 3-loss SEC team or an ACC team. Maybe I'm just way overthinking that, but I feel like that has to come into the psyche of future. They're playing for SEC respect.
Mm-hmm. I would say.
I think there's so much on the line that doesn't, I don't think Kevin Jennings is thinking about that.
Sure.
Well, I know, Kevin Jennings is not thinking about that too, but I can.
I'll say this. I think there is an Empire Strikes Back coming, right? Whatever that form may be, whether that's only 2 buys and they adjust a lot of the seating when it comes to the 14 team or whatever. There's some reckoning coming just because that's how the SEC is able to politic their way. But I agree. I'll agree. I kind of side with Craven more. A little bit of the ACC they're playing for. Yes, they're certainly playing for respect. Because if Clemson and SMU get dog walked, right, all of a sudden it's like, oh, this team should have been maybe just one bid, Yeah. But to Craven's point, I don't think that's necessarily a concern for SMU. They're in, right? Mm-hmm. Like that they don't Like they're not trying to be like, we don't need to prove that we need to, but they're in. Right?
Season's a massive success already.
Right, exactly. Massive success already. They don't need to prove that they need to be in. They're just in, and now they can just play. And so to me, when it comes to Penn State, though, yes, all the pressure of the world is on them because they've played 3 competitive games. 3 games against teams of any caliber. Really.
That matter.
Twice against Ohio
State, Illinois, right?
Illinois, yes, and then Oregon. And they look good against Oregon and Ohio State, but they couldn't win. And that's been the story. Like we mentioned, that's been the story of Penn State for years. Was they're that second tier, right? They're the team. They're the Ole Miss, right? Except they were able to get in this year because the Big Ten was kind of down in a lot of ways as far as depth's concerned. Mm-hmm. So when you look at this game, it was a very funny dynamic that the game played with me on Saturday because this was going on at the same time as the ACC championship, and I had the ACC championship on my big screen, and then I had the Big Ten on my laptop. And then by halftime, I was like, do I got to switch these games? Because I was like, is Clemson about to dog walk SMU? And is Oregon about to let Penn State back into this game? And sure enough, yeah, kind of. And I kind of had to keep both simultaneously on at the end. But the thing that worried me, I thought this was a game that SMU, again, I don't think they're going to win this game by a lot. But like, this game all of a sudden does worry me now. Because I think Penn State may just be a team that can't beat that caliber of team, but I do think they're a team that can take care of business against a team like not a team like SMU, but a team that they're on paper better than.
They rarely play down.
Right.
They never play up.
Right. That's a great way to put it. And in particular, this rushing attack is really good. Where Penn State loses games and where they've really struggled is when Drew Aller has to win them games. Mm-hmm. When they're able to run the ball like they were against Oregon, Drew Aller can just kind of hang back and just deliver what he needs to, and they're able to sail. But when Drew Aller's asked to pass 40 times a game, like against Ohio State or something, when it's kind of played in a phone booth, then yeah, that's when they kind of lose.
I think, and Craven, you back me up on this if you agree, but like the biggest matchup, what Ish is talking about is SMU's defense and Scott Simons against Penn State's offense and Andy Kotelnicki. Like that is one of the best coordinator-on-coordinator battles, and it comes to the line of scrimmage at the trenches.
Yes.
Because SMU's rushing defense is first in the ACC, but as Ish mentioned, Penn State leans on that run game. Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton combined for over 1,700 yards. So, like, who do you think has the advantage there?
Yeah, I mean, coming into this season, we worried about SMU and their ability to kind of handle P4 football teams in the trenches, coming off of a 2023 season where they had lost 3 to Power 4 teams. To their credit, it felt like they handled Clemson okay. Like they played them to at least a draw up front, especially over the last 3 quarters. But yeah, I think this is going to be, kind of what are those guys up front, defensive line and offensive line. Abdul Carter's a really good pass rusher for Penn State. And you would think the advantage for the Nittany Lions is up front on both sides of the ball. Mm-hmm. If SMU can play them to a draw, I like their skill position guys. Like I think SMU can go score some points. I think SMU will be solid against the Penn State passing attack as long as they can make them one-dimensional. Penn State, it's kind of like the Texas offense, right? Mm-hmm. Like if Penn State is allowed to be balanced, then it's fine. You're not asking Aller to do more than he can. You get some favorable matchups on the outside, just like when Ewers has a rushing attack. But if SMU can make them one-dimensional, put that on the passing game, I think they do stand a chance to score with them. Because like against Clemson, SMU didn't score early, but it felt like it was just a matter of time. If they could stop kind of bumping their toe up against it, they'd figure it out, and they eventually broke through. I don't think a team is going to shut down SMU. It's just a matter of if that defense can hold serve and if they can get a better start than they had against Clemson.
And I think Penn State has a very interesting X factor, not even an X factor. He's like plan B, probably A of that offense, and Tyler Warren at tight end, because he's probably the best tight end in the country. He's probably winning the Mackey. What does SMU do with him, right? Do you is he too big for a McGill, right? Is he too big for a McGill? Is he too big for a Deuce Harmon? Probably, right? But is he too good of a pass catcher for some of those linebackers? So how they match up with him, and I trust Scott Simons to have a pretty good game plan for him, but that's plan A when it comes to the passing game, where it's like, how do we deal with that guy who's going to be probably a second-round pick, third-round pick or something? Because that's something that SMU hasn't seen, but many teams haven't seen, is like a 1,000-yard tight end reliable pass catcher, right? Even with Gunnar Helm in Texas, he doesn't have those numbers.
And we worried about with SMU allowing the explosive plays, looking forward to a hypothetical ACC matchup with Miami.
Yeah.
But Penn State is they're averaging 6.7 yards a play. It's fourth in the nation.
Yep.
So they are an explosive offense, even though they're very balanced.
Yeah.
And that's Bryant Wesco and Clemson having their number on a 35-yard catch and a 43-yard catch in that first quarter. So does Penn State have a dynamic wide receiver on the outside like Bryant Wesco? Or is it all tight end?
It's all. I mean, I think Warren leads them by 400, 500 yards receiving. Yeah.
So they don't have to worry about a Bryant Wesco, a Midlothian legend out there.
That was awesome.
Exactly. I know. I was like, man, we're Westlake to Midlothian. Why are we getting cooked by Texas players?
I know.
Sucks. But last thing on this, putting it back on SMU. I mean, that was the last 2 drives from Jennings.
He's got stones, man.
Not
Preston Stone. He's got Kevin Jennings.
They don't have Stone. He's probably out of there. But I think shout out Timothy Chalamet, who's on game day. I don't know if his team or whatever worked up some good notes. He mentioned he dropped Kevin Jennings as an early Heisman favorite contender for next year. Those last 2 drives, I was like, I could see it. It's just there's those moments where you're nothing flustered him. They got pressure on him. He was able just to maneuver a little bit out of the pocket and get and it's oh my God, he can handle, like Craven mentioned, he can handle this Penn State defense, and I have no issue with him in this moment, right? Because I was looking at the weather a couple of minutes ago, and it's not. I was like, is it gonna be a chance of snow? I don't think so. It's 20% at least this far out, but that's gonna be a cold environment. It's gonna be interesting, but if we've seen anything, that dude handles whatever is thrown his way.
Yeah, I don't worry about Kevin Jennings going into Happy Valley and being intimidated by that environment.
I'm more worried about Craven in Happy Valley.
No, it's just the Valley. It's just the Valley.
Any last words on this one, Craven?
No. I mean, I do think Penn State's defense is really good. Mm-hmm. So, it's going to be up to SMU to get 20 plus on here because it's asking the defense too much to shut Penn State completely down. They're going to need to score some points. They're going to have to beat them the way TCU beat Michigan with a couple turnovers, score some points, get in the 30s or 40s. It's going to be a game.
Yep.
Bring up Parka.
Yes, seriously. By the way,
some long johns.
How about the Texas games being 11 and 3 o'clock back to back? I love that.
Mm-hmm. So very nice.
Very convenient for us. All right, Mallory.
Would have been cooler if they played each other.
Would have been cooler if they played each other. Would have been cooler if it was
too easy.
State either, because we're gonna have to have that on in the booth. So
I know.
We'll be watching. I don't know what time is that game. What time does that coincide with? What day is that? Saturday.
Yep.
So it's the big dogs. Okay,
the big dogs.
Yeah, we'll be watching.
Big dogs playing on big dogs.
We'll be watching Duncanville, North Shore Part 74. This game on the side screen. So.